Now, you can maybe tell us about Penn State's downfield attack, Marty, because I'll be honest. I mean, the hype train for Drew Allar was strong in the offseason, but I really haven't seen a ton of Penn State football this year, partially because I just don't get to watch as much college football as I used to with kind of being honed in on Iowa. But, these games have been lopsided. Penn State's look good.
Yeah, I will say the Drew hype train. I mean, well, maybe it hit a little bit of a bump in the road against Illinois. It really hasn't slowed down. I mean, his adjusted completion percentage going into that game, so you take away drops and throwaways, was 92%. And against Illinois, he was 15 of 33. But if you take away drops and throwaways, because drops were a major problem for Penn State on Saturday, his adjusted completion percentage jumps to 66%. And, Mark, you and I talked about this a little bit last night. As much as Illinois' defense struggled against Kansas, that's still a really good defense. So you'll gladly take an adjusted completion percentage of 66% on the road in Big Ten play against a team like Illinois. And there were also 4 balls that got batted down at the line of scrimmage because Johnny Newton just looked like Aaron Donald on Saturday. And that doesn't go into that. But, yeah, Drew has been tremendous. He's been better than I think anybody could have anticipated thus far. Now, I will say if there is one major question mark about Penn State's offense, it's the receivers. They played really well against West Virginia and Delaware. Definitely took a step back against Illinois. Now, Trey Wallace, who is an important starter for them, did not play against Illinois. Went through pregame warmups, so I have a hard time seeing him missing back-to-back games. If he went through pregame warmups and was unable to go. But yeah, the big play, if it's going to come with this offense in the passing game, it's going to be Keandre Lambert-Smith, who started to break out from the end of the year last year, back-to-back 100-yard games against Michigan State and then in the Rose Bowl, including in the Rose Bowl an 88-yard touchdown catch, which I think was a new Rose Bowl record.
And, I mean, has Drew Allar, obviously didn't last week, but has he shown any propensity to turn the ball over so far?
There's some throws he's made where people are like, man, you're lucky that I didn't get picked off, but you have to take into consideration his arm talent. There's throws he can make that 99% of quarterbacks, it's going to be intercepted. But he's got the ability to thread that needle like a lot of quarterbacks don't. So I don't worry about that. You mentioned things on Saturday. Their biggest problem was their offense executed extremely poorly. Not just the drops, the biggest penalty in that game. They were up 13-0, had a 3rd and 1 at the Illinois 15, well underway to make it 20-0 and probably just run away with it. Keandre Lambert-Smith got called for a late hit, backed them up 15 yards, incomplete pass, blocked field goal, and Illinois went down and scored. So they've got to execute better. They've got to clean those things up. And again, this is where, and you said it yourself, with Illinois playing from behind, it can be tough reading the stat sheet. Illinois, their last 2 possessions, which was their starting offense against a lot of threes and a decent amount of walk-ons running around on the field, is when they put up a lot of yards. They had to have had over 100 yards combined between those 2 drives. And again, I mean, should you stop that as a defense? Absolutely. But whenever you have your 3rd stringers, walk-ons, true freshmen out there against the starting offense from the Big Ten, you're going to expect to give up some yards. So, but again, you said it yourself. When you look at just the box score, knowing one team was losing by 20 plus, they're going to have more yards passing just because you're going to throw the ball more.
You wonder if James Franklin has put it in Drew Allar's head about Iowa's propensity to create turnovers. I wonder if he dares put that in his head as a cautionary note to say, this team's a little bit different here.
I wouldn't do that.
Or you just don't want to put that in his head, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Like, hey, you know what? You've got a special arm. You've got as much arm talent as any quarterback in the country other than Caleb Williams. Like, go play ball. You make a mistake, whatever, shake it off. You'll get him next time. I think that would be, at least to me, as someone who firmly believes when it comes to sports, is just as much mental as it is physical. I wouldn't even want to plant that seed.
Mark, do you agree with that assessment that Drew Allar has as much arm talent as anyone but Caleb Williams?
I do think that Caleb Williams is above everyone else. I just think it's not even a debate. But Drew Allar has a ton of football to play, of course. The first time he played a meaningful, it would have been the first time he ever played, was the Purdue game.
Yes.
The opener last. He whistled one. He came in. He whistled a throw to the sideline. I was like, man, that's fluid. That's smooth. He just flicked it and spun an out route. It's hard for me to. I haven't watched him. The West Virginia game I had an eye on, but I wasn't really dissecting it. I did watch this game, and was not a great performance, of course. It was uneven against Illinois. I did watch this game. Yeah, I think I made the statement, and Corey and I got into it about whether you would take Cade McNamara or you would take Kyle McCord or Drew Allar, and I said we had that conversation in the off season, right? Am I not framing this correctly?
A little bit out of context.
In what way?
Go ahead.
No, I want to make sure I'm saying this accurately, but I thought that you said who would you take or who's better, and you said who's better. And I said I'd take either McCord or Allar over Cade McNamara just based on sheer ability.
First of all, that conversation was, thank you for acknowledging, it was prior to the season starting.
Yeah.
I was commenting on a top 5 quarterback list from Fox or from Pro Football Focus or one of those social media networks profiles. And they had like Allar, Kyle McCord, Tanner Mordecai, Hudson. They'd like a bunch of unknown guys who are not unknowns, but I mean, guys who haven't proven anything at their respective schools ahead of a guy in Cade McNamara who's been to a college football playoff and won a Big Ten championship. And so I just said, if you're looking at getting a proven guy, there were question marks about McCord and Allar heading into the year. Now, maybe you disagree with that, Mark, but they hadn't really, frankly, there were question marks about Hudson Card at Purdue.
No, I didn't disagree with there being question marks. If somebody didn't play, then there are question marks. Bryce Young, I had the confidence to rank him second in the country leading into a season in which he had only thrown like 5 passes the year before in garbage time, but I still had the confidence that he was going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Same thing with Allar. I would just say I'd flat out take him.
I also made the comment that I think we both agreed on that Cade McNamara is the ideal quarterback for the situation at Iowa.
Sure.
Not that Drew Allar couldn't perform well with this team and Kyle McCord, but it's just a totally different animal. Now, here's something we haven't talked about. Last few minutes of the show, we should probably acknowledge Cade McNamara didn't play very well on Saturday. He hasn't played great these last 2 weeks. He's still dealing with an injury. And I did make the comment on Saturday that I wish they had sat him. And I said it prior to the game. I wish they'd shut him down for a week. I'm not on the medical staff. I don't know if that's the right opinion to have, but it is my opinion based on the fact that I saw him scramble one time on Saturday and he's wincing and grimacing following an 8-yard run. That frustrates me because don't convince me you're not going to be able to convince me for a second that Iowa couldn't have won that game on Saturday, that they won 41-10 with Deacon Hill or Joe Labus. Again, Cade didn't play that well, threw 2 picks actually. So, hindsight's 2020. We said it before. Obviously, I'm sure they thought about that. They had that consideration in mind. They decided not to do that. Perhaps that will help him in the long run. Maybe people keep telling me that he needs to gain chemistry with his receivers. I just hate to think of another CJ Beathard situation back in 2016, Mark, where he's just hampered all year long. So that's a little bit worrisome, but I still have a lot of faith in Cade McNamara based on everything we've talked about in the past. I thought he played pretty well in week 1, but he hasn't really been tested either. He hasn't needed to put on any really strong level of performance through the year. Maybe he will on Saturday, but if it starts raining, like Marty said, you're probably going to see a heavy ground attack, and then it's a matter of ball security with a couple freshman backs with a slippery ball and all that stuff. But the quarterback battle will be an interesting one because he has went there and won. Let's not forget that, Marty. Cade and Eric all have both been in Happy Valley for a whiteout and won. And if I'm not mistaken, Drew Allar's never played in a whiteout. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, no, Drew played in the whiteout quite a bit last year because they just absolutely curb stomped Minnesota. So Drew got almost the entire second half. Now, obviously, starting in it and facing Iowa are 2 different animals. And I guess I shouldn't diss Minnesota too bad because Joe Rossi is one hell of a defensive coordinator himself. But that Minnesota team couldn't throw the ball, so that made things pretty easy on them last year. But yeah, you mentioned Cade and Eric Hall in what was that, 2021, where now that is a game that quite honestly Penn State should have won with like 5 minutes to go, maybe less than that, and the game tied. They forced a strip sack on McNamara. They recovered it like the Michigan 8 and could not do anything at that point, had to kick a field goal. And then Michigan went down and scored because Kalen King, who was a freshman at the time, got crossed up in coverage and ran into a linebacker and left Eric Hall wide open to walk in for a go-ahead touchdown. But I agree that matters, that the fact that Cade McNamara has started at Beaver Stadium before. Now, that was also a noon kick, so obviously a totally different animal than Beaver Stadium at night. But, yeah, I think if McNamara, and I was wondering about that because I knew he got hurt preseason. So if McNamara has any sort of injury, I will be curious to see how that plays out Saturday, because this Penn State defense, I know they haven't gotten a ton of sacks this year, but a lot of it has been, they going into the Illinois game, they'd only faced, I think, like 40 pass attempts all year, which is a testament to the defensive end room and the cornerbacks. And B, teams, are looking to get rid of the ball quickly because this defensive end room is probably the best in the Big Ten. So I think that's as much of a factor as anything. That said, they have been hurrying, pressuring, and hitting quarterbacks pretty frequently. And we saw that Saturday. Early in the second quarter, Luke Altmaier got just blown up on a play by defensive end Amin Vanover and just was never the same the rest of the game. And if Cade McNamara is coming into this potentially banged up already, that's football. You can call it dirty, you can call you what it want. If you're on a defense and you know that quarterback's already in pain, you're going to take every shot you can get, whether it's a quarterback, running back, whatever it is, because you're going to want to, make it even more difficult on them. So we'll see what happens. And just because we were talking about it, I pulled up the weather real fast. The most recent they have for AccuWeather out of state college is the 60% chance of rain Saturday night. So it's how much they're going to get, I don't know, but it definitely seems to be, as we get later in the week, trending more and more towards there being some rain, at least at some point during that game. So that definitely could be the great equalizer for Iowa.
And the forecast that I looked at said the same. And Marty, it said that a greater chance of rain in the evening than in the morning.
Yes, so as the day goes on, the chance of rain increases. Which, again, if you're Iowa, that's probably what you want to see. 7:30 kickoff. It doesn't matter. And this is not just an Iowa thing. If Penn State was playing Ohio State this Saturday, I'd say the same thing. As Ohio State athletes are a little bit better, you want that rain to kind of slow those things down. It can be the great neutralizer. As a Penn State fan, I go back to the 2009 Citrus Bowl where LSU just had freaks all over the field, and they played in a mud bowl, and LSU literally could not do anything. And Penn State won a game they probably shouldn't have won, with the weather being a big factor. It's a real thing.